This is Ag Matters PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, brought to you by the Iowa Soybean Association, your daily recap of the information that affects Iowa's farmers, producers, and consumers, right here in the heart of the heartland. With reports from our award-winning broadcast team of Dustin Hoffman, Riley Smith, and Mark Magnuson. Now, from the IARN studios in Des Moines, here's Mark Magnuson.
Hello and welcome to Ag Matters PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. I'm Mark Magnuson. Today is Thursday, May 30th, 2024, and we're so glad you can join us for today's show. In today's episode, I will bring you the latest Iowa Ag News headlines, and then we will be joined by Andy Petersen and Lee Koenigsfeld. He is a Beck's agronomist, and we will get an agronomy update. It is time now for our closing market summary.
It's time now for the Ag Matters PM Closing Market Summary, your source for market analysis and settlement prices from the day's trade in Chicago, courtesy of the folks at agmarket.net.
At the end of another trading day, we are joined now by Robin Schmahl of agmarket.net for our closing market summary. Robin, we had a lot of selling in the marketplace yesterday, a lot of red on the board. Kind of continued the theme here today. What did we see in the grains?
Continued today. We saw more pressure on the grains. Of course, wheat seeing the most pressure, and then corn as well. Part of it has to do with planting progress that we saw on Tuesday. We're not that far behind on planting progress, soybeans or corn. I mean, we're a little bit behind, but not that far. Things are being done. It's still, it's getting later than what we'd like to see, but still not that bad. The emergence is more a little bit behind of last year, maybe about 10% on both of them. So the always the concern over delays on wet weather generally doesn't last very long, and we're seeing that again this year. Now we've seen 3 days of selling, just basically after we came, the market opened after Memorial Day. We've just seen selling taking place. And that's part of it. The other part of it is that at least today, they basically said little to no ethanol will qualify for the sustainable aviation fuel subsidies. The Biden administration changed some of their requirements at the last minute, basically, is what they said. They toughened some of the climate requirements, and that kind of throws some of that out of there. Now, there were 3 different criteria they needed for using the ethanol for aviation fuel, and there's very few farmers that are meeting all of those requirements. So, and I don't know how they would be determining that or working that, because that almost sounds like you have to keep things more separated. And anyway, so at least at the present time, so that hit more of the, or put more of the pressure as far as the corn market is concerned. Now, Morgan Stanley came out and basically said on the soybean side with South America, they anticipate a 5 million metric tons of loss for that crop there, 2 million ton loss for stored soybeans, 3 million ton harvest loss, which can take down the balance sheets a little bit, but that's not that big of a deal in the big picture. As far as that's concerned, we may see a little step up in some of our soybean plantings from what was initially anticipated based on what the weather has been dealing in some areas, but it's too early to tell how that's going to work into the balance sheets. So we did have, that was a little positive, but not enough in order to circumvent the selling that we've seen across the board yesterday, today, really since we came back from the Memorial holiday. The wheat, that likely seen the top in the market. And I'm just mentioning that because we've seen a lot of the bullishness that's underpinned that market for a period of time, and now it's kind of settled back. So we're looking at fairly decent crop conditions there. Things are getting closer to harvest. Unless we see anything major right now, that market may have seen its peak just something for hedgers to keep in mind if they've got wheat that they're going to produce and sell. So we got to keep that in mind to be realistic, that the markets don't go up forever. And once it's run its course here, we might just be sideways to settle a little bit lower at this point.
Over on the other side of the ag marketplace with the cattle and hogs, do we see the same downturn today?
Well, we did see some more pressure coming in on the market. Now, obviously, yesterday we saw the real pressure because of China blocking beef from the JBS Greeley, Colorado plant. They found traces of ractopamine in some of the, what do they call it, the omesum products. It wasn't actually meat, but the omesum products, which is the third stomach, they import a lot of that type of stuff. So finding that in there, which they have banned it from China, Europe has banned it. There's other countries that have banned it as well because of some health concerns. So they did shut off imports, or they blocked those imports from the Greeley, Colorado plant. And also a cold storage facility in Coolport, Oakland in California, that was on the list as well. So we don't know how that will all develop yet as time goes on. This ractopamine is a feed additive that's used a lot in the cattle. It used to be in hogs, but not anymore really that much, but more in the cattle. It's kind of a standard to some extent, as far as feed additive is concerned. It keeps the meat leaner. Cattle grow quicker, and that's really the purpose of it. But that put a real concern into the marketplace. Now, we didn't see quite the drop today off of that, but if that hits consumers and stuff, it may just have an impact. Maybe it doesn't have a long-term impact on what's going on here, but there's always that perception in the market. And if we do lose some of our market share, even for some beef products, that can have an impact. Now, the other thing that was breaking news today was another Michigan dairy worker was diagnosed with bird flu. And that's the third since bird flu was discovered in dairy cattle. Now, we've seen that it's not an issue in the meat. They've done studies on it. It's not an issue in milk. But the fact that another dairy worker was diagnosed with it, they've been working on a vaccine that they might be looking at, making available to dairy workers, veterinarians, laboratory workers. But it just kind of puts another bit of a red flag out in that market. Again, it just leaves a lot of uncertainty for traders. Now, today, boxed beef prices were mixed at midday. Choice was up 81 cents. Select down 28. That's something that we really have to watch, because we did see strong boxed beef prices through Memorial Day. If that demand has been filled and now we go into maybe more lackluster demand, we might see boxed beef kind of settle back a little bit. That will have an impact on the direction of futures and the direction of cash as well. Now, feedlots are looking for higher prices this week, which that's understandable based off the last couple of weeks where we've been able to see some nice strength as far as cash trading is concerned. On the hogs, July and August contracts didn't move to new lows early today, but fortunately found some buying interest down there. Whether that would be kind of a reversal type of a situation is hard to tell. We did see the strength come into the earlier or closer months, not so much in the later months. They closed just slightly lower. The cloud hanging over that market is the demand concerns, coming into the summer time frame. And that continues to be something that circulates in the marketplace, keeps traders a little more on the bearish side. The National Daily Direct hog report for the morning was up 2 cents, not a big deal on the cash. But we did see strong cash the first 2 days of the week. We didn't anticipate, a lot of strength for today and tomorrow. Cutouts at midday were up 49 cents. Not a lot, not enough to support the market. But with the oversold condition in the market, anything that might at least give a little bit of a positivity to that market might see some short covering.
He is Robin Schmahl with agmarket.net, our guest here today on Thursday. Robin, what's the best way for our viewers to get in touch for more marketing information?
They can call me directly if they would like at 877-256-3253, or to get in touch with Ag Market in general, go to agmarket.net, and 844 number is listed there, and they can feel free to call in and somebody will be glad to help.
Thanks so much for the time. Appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day.
All right, you as well, and it's always a pleasure.
Thank you to Robin Schmahl of agmarket.net for joining us for our closing market summary today. Let's turn now to the closing numbers. You can find those numbers anytime on our website at iowaagnet.com. Just hover over the Markets tab, and you will find those numbers at your fingertips anytime.
July corn closed down 6.5 at 448 3/4. July soybeans down 4 1/4 at 1209 3/4. July soybean meal down $5.50 at 363.60. July soybean oil down 16 cents at 45.72. Chicago wheat down 11 3/4 at 681 even. Minneapolis wheat down 10 even at 742 even. Kansas City hard red wheat down 10 1/4 at 709 1/2. July oats up 1 1/4 at 385 3/4. On the Merc, June live cattle down 80 cents at 182.55. August feeder cattle down $1.17 at 259.07. June lean hogs up 20 cents at 93.97. June pork cutout up 7 cents at 102.32. Class 3 milk up 4 cents at 19.36.
And that's our ag market coverage for today. It is time now to hear from our sponsor, the Iowa Soybean Association, and the Soybean Checkoff. And up next, it is the latest Iowa Ag News headlines.
Iowa Soybean Association is driven to deliver for Iowa's 40,000 soybean farmers. We're proud to provide objective agronomic research, a helping hand with soil and water stewardship, and timely industry news powered by the Soybean Checkoff. Learn more at iasoybeans.com.
It is time now for the latest Iowa Ag News headlines. The Renewable Fuel Standard mandates that a specific volume of certain biofuels be used each year in transportation fuel. One category of biofuels in the mandate is biomass-based diesel. For many years, biodiesel filled that part of the mandate. Biodiesel production grew steadily in the early 2000s to hit a peak of 1.8 billion gallons during the 2018-19 marketing year. Renewable diesel has now replaced biodiesel's share of the market. Production of renewable diesel has grown from 40 million gallons in the 2010-2011 marketing year to 2.3 billion gallons in 22-23. That surpassed biodiesel production for the first time. Combined biodiesel and renewable diesel pushed total biomass-based diesel production to an all-time high in 2022-23. As that part of the biofuel sector has mostly expanded since 2001-2002, an increasing share of soybean oil produced in the United States is now used for the biofuel, going from 1% in 2001 to 46% in 2022. The United States and European Union are taking steps to acquire or manufacture H5N1 bird flu vaccines. Reports say the vaccines would protect at-risk poultry and dairy workers, veterinarians, and lab technicians. Experts say this could curb a pandemic threat. U.S. officials are already moving bulk vaccine that closely matches the current virus into almost 5 million vaccine doses. These actions come after the rapid spread of a new bird flu that first emerged in late 2020, killing a large number of wild birds and domestic poultry. In 2024, the virus began infecting several mammal species, including cattle. The virus has infected a large number of cattle in 9 states and 2 dairy employees. The Food and Drug Administration estimates that 20% of the U.S. milk supply shows signs of the virus, increasing chances of a wider spread. Officials told Reuters the sole focus should be on preventing the spread of the disease. And also in today's show, we are joined by Andy Petersen for a conversation with Beck's agronomist Lee Koenigsfeld. You're watching Ag Matters PM on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. Here's Andy.
It's amazing. We were just talking on Iowa Ag Matters here, how things have changed in regard to moisture in just a short amount of time. And that the drought monitor does still show some drier conditions, whether they're actually that dry or not, or the monitor needs to catch up. Probably a legitimate topic of conversation, because we're going to go out in the field with the guy who's witnessed it all. Good Iowa Ag Matters advocate Lee Koenigsfeld, agronomist with our friends at Beck's Hybrids in northeastern Iowa. Done planting, which is always a good feeling somehow in and amongst all the rains. And boy, after the last system that came through, Lee, I'm noticing rivers are bank full. There's a lot of standing water, and I would imagine there's some concern about potential replant situations as well.
Yeah, so looking across my territory, northeast Iowa, with this last system that went through, we had basically anywhere from 2 inches all the way up to 9 inches locally in some areas I had heard. So to say that we are saturated, I think is maybe an understatement. Driving around, look at some fields that are, completely underwater when we're looking at some river bottoms, creek bottoms, basically that, we've got some good tiling in northeast Iowa, and they're running full, and that fills up streams and stuff very, very quickly. And so then we spill out over the banks, obviously. So, but yeah, so it's just kind of looking at, that flooding scenario and basically waterlogged scenarios, because we had tremendous planting progress take place last week, whether it was beans or corn. We got a lot of things in the ground essentially to just go around and get rained on then Sunday through the first couple of days of this week. So, when we look at that, the biggest thing that we look at when we talk about basically waterlogged soils or flooded soils, however you want to determine it, is the biggest thing we got to look at is oxygen deprivation. Those seeds or plants need oxygen to continue to develop and grow. The biggest thing there is the root development. As we start to deplete the oxygen in there, we start to actually, essentially, we start killing off root tissue. So you can actually get, as the water goes down, you'll start getting drought-like symptoms, basically, because there's no root tissue left. Essentially, if it stays wet for too long, basically you'll have rootless corn, essentially, or rootless soybeans. So they can't pull any moisture in, they can't pull any nutrients in, and so it looks like they're in a drought scenario. So, but as far as survivability goes, what we look at there is basically a 48-hour window before we kind of really deplete all of that oxygen within that soil profile. Now, it's somewhat temperature dependent and plant size dependent as well too. So if we've got a plant up and growing and it doesn't get completely submerged, it's going to continue to try to photosynthesize, which requires oxygen basically for those processes to take place. So we're going to burn through that oxygen that we do have a lot faster, as opposed to a plant that, is not completely up, or it is completely submerged. Essentially, plant processes are going to cease to take place until we can get that back out of the water. And so we will burn through oxygen a little less quickly in that scenario. We look at Iowa State data and various university data on that, and we see survivability somewhere in that 48 to potentially up to 4 days. And temperature plays a big portion on that, as well as crop growth. So the warmer it is, the faster we burn through that oxygen. So
even if it survives, Lee, what damage is done, and what's the replant consideration? Did you just go out and redo it? Obviously, you got to get it to dry out first.
Yeah. So obviously, even if we decide that a replant is going to be necessary, not rushing out there and basically making a bad situation worse by trying to mud something in 2 to 3 days, before it would be nice and fit. You're not gaining anything in those 2 to 3 days. You're doing more harm than good. The biggest thing to look for then, we should see recovery. You should start to see new leaf tissue once the water recedes in like 3 to 5 days. If you're not seeing that new tissue within 3 to 5 days, chances are those plants are on their way out the door, so to speak. So doing stand evaluations, basically going through your normal replant scenarios there as well too. Now, if you decide not to replant and we look at, we had enough survivability, the biggest thing there then is one, potentially, and this is going to sound somewhat counterintuitive, is getting another small rain to wash leaves and wash all of the debris from those waters off potentially is going to be crucial. But we definitely increase the chance for, early season seedling diseases. So keeping an eye on those as well too. Crown rot is obviously a major concern. So potentially looking at a late season fungicide as well too, to help protect that plant as we get a lot closer to harvest too. So just because it survives the initial flood does not mean it's out of the woods yet. It's going to see increased disease pressure just due to the amount of water getting into the whorl on corn, or just basically being in contact with the plant in general. So not out of the woods yet there either, but you're going to typically follow your normal replant scenario there, and hopefully you see regrowth in 3 to 5 days. And survivability is better than what we thought, because it does seem like the waters are receding fairly quickly.
That's on corn. What about on soybeans?
So soybeans potentially are a little bit more resilient potentially in their survivability, just because they don't have that whorl essentially that's going to trap moisture, trap disease stuff. That growing point's up, it can get dried out a lot faster once that water recedes. So we still can see increased disease pressure there as well too. The nice thing about soybeans is we don't have to worry about trying to fill in, like within the row, or completely tear up and start over like we would have to do with corn. So looking at your stands, and at this point in time, it's not going to be unheard of to, spike in an extra 50 to 100,000, depending on how bad, the stand is reduced at that point in time too. And you're gonna look for the same thing too, basically leaf development within that 3 to 5 day period. And if it's not emerged yet, whether it's corn or beans, digging that up to see whether, the root tissue still has that nice white to cream color to it, or if it's starting to basically kind of start to rot off. If it starts to be mushy, if what tissues there is not firm, then we know we're probably looking at a lost cause and need to start evaluating for replant there.
So what, 80,000 stand and above you're leaving, something like that?
Well, on soybeans, a lot of it for me is going to depend somewhat on planting date. So obviously the earlier they were planted, the more stand we can afford to lose. The later they're planted, we may need to look at bumping that population up just to try to get more nodes per acre to help maximize what yield potential we can. So it's somewhat there. So I would say anything planted, prior to last week, I think you're right on there with that 70 to 80,000 plant population. If we can stay somewhere in that range, probably not going to look at a replant scenario then. If we were to drop below that 70,000 mark, would probably look at spiking some additional in. Now, if we were planted in, just this past planting window here, then I'm going to potentially move that replant number up to a little bit. So if we've dropped a little bit, maybe in that 80 to 90 range, I might look at maybe spiking some more in potentially. Not a ton, but just try to get us up closer to maybe that final stand there in that 110 to 120. Try to get us some more nodes per acre, essentially.
How can we find out more, Lee?
Contact your local Beck's representative. Be more than happy to walk through this. We've got a very detailed delayed planting and replant guide that we are more than happy to go through and look at within your field. So contact myself, contact Greg, or your local dealer or seed advisor.
That's fantastic. Lee Koenigsfeld, Northeast Iowa agronomist with our friends at Beck's Hybrids, here with us today on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network.
Thank you to Lee Koenigsfeld with Beck's for joining today's show. And that brings us to the end of today's episode. You can find all of our daily content on our website at iowaagnet.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, X, LinkedIn, and TikTok. And you can find our video content and previous episodes of AM PM on our YouTube channel. Don't forget as well our free morning, midday, and closing market podcasts. Those are found on Apple, Amazon, Google, Spotify, and Podbean. From the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network studios in Des Moines, I'm Mark Magnuson. On behalf of Riley Smith, Dustin Huffman, Quentin Slater, and Andy Petersen, we thank you for watching. This has been Ag Matters PM.